Welcome to Cooperative Conversations, the live stream series where we connect you to the real stories of Australian primary producers who are working and growing together in cooperatives, despite all the trials and tribulations that involves. Hi, I'm Pete Lewis, and one way or another I've been helping Australian farmers tell the great stories of food and fibre production here for the past 25 years. Now, obviously, it's been a tough few years. Most recently, one thing after another has hit farming: droughts, bushfires, smoke taint, bank pressures, floods, and of course, most recently, the coronavirus. All of it really has started a conversation about the importance for Australian farmers, fishers, and foresters to the Australian economy. Before we get underway, though, I really want to encourage you to take part in the poll that we're running alongside this interview. And the question today is, what is the biggest benefit that internet connectivity has brought to farming? You get a number of choices. Is it A, planning capabilities, B, data information, C, precision farming techniques, D, monitoring expertise, E, communication, F, market data, and the final one, time saving. Click on the poll on the live chat to the right of this stream to select your answer. Now we're joined by a farmer and leader of one of Australia's best known and most recognised cooperatives, the Co-operative Bulk Handling organisation, CBH. It has set the bar for innovation and is an excellent model of how big you can get by combining resources and knowledge. Natalie Browning is a farmer based in the wheat belt in Western Australia on a 100% cropping enterprise of 7,500 hectares. The Brownings grow wheat, barley, lupins, and sometimes canola. Natalie started farming at 17 when she met her fourth generation farmer husband, Carl Browning. She became a member of CBH when she got married, and 14 years later, she's one of the leaders in this, Australia's biggest farming cooperative, driving innovation and membership as CBH's deputy chair. Natalie, it is great to have you on to connect with you into the wheat belt in WA, and you've had a bit of rain.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. It's great to be here with you today. Yes, we've been lucky enough to have some rain over the last couple of days, and we're getting down to the business end of the season, so it's always welcomed.
Fantastic. Natalie, CBH was created almost 90 years ago. Can you tell us what your co-op does and how did it start?
Yep, sure. Yes, so CBH Group is Australia's largest cooperative. So as you said, formed many years ago in 1933. It's owned and controlled by about 3,900 West Australian grain growers. And CBH's sole purpose is to get our growers' grain from their farm to the international markets at the lowest price possible while providing a good service in doing that. At the core of CBH is one true value, and that is to sustainably create and return value to WA growers. And that hasn't changed since CBH was first founded in 1933. So CBH Group has today it has over $2 billion in assets, and it has annual revenue which sometimes exceeds $4 billion. Has 1,100 permanent staff, and at harvest time, when we're taking the grain from October through to January, there's an extra 1,800 casual staff that come on board. A bit of the history behind CBH. So CBH Group was first formed during or just after the Great Depression. And back in those days, wheat was stored in 20-kilo Hessian bags. So growers got together and recognised that having a cheap and efficient bulk handling system would greatly reduce growers' costs and also strengthening the wheat industry, which was really struggling in Western Australia at the time. The CBH Group started with 5 trial sites, and in its first year it received 42,000 tonne. Over a period of time, there were up to 300 network sites, and as farmers have grown bigger and technology and innovation have come on board, the sites have consolidated down to 100. And if you think back to the first harvest of 42,000 tonnes, 2 harvests ago, We took over 16.5 million tonnes. We've got enough storage capacity for 20 million tonnes. So quite an extraordinary story.
Indeed. It's often said that pressure makes diamonds. I imagine there must have been some very larger than life and very determined characters at the genesis of CBH.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to be brave enough to take the leap to start CBH Group takes a lot of courage. And it's just amazing to think that over the past 87 years, what it started out as, to what it's grown into today, Australia's largest cooperative that's been owned and controlled and governed by farmers for 87 years. It's the fourth largest private company in Australia. Yeah, it's just an amazing story, and I think the growers of today will be forever grateful that growers back then had the foresight and the courage to one, start the business, and to two, set it up as a co-op, which truly delivers the biggest benefit to growers.
Natalie, tell us a little about the structure of CBH. It's obviously been intrinsically important to its continued viability and success.
Yeah, absolutely. So the CBH Group is a non-distributing co-op, so it effectively operates as a not-for-profit organisation. So it's quite unique, where the owners of the business are also the customers and the sole beneficiary of the business. So very different to a corporate structure, where the aim of a corporate structure is obviously to make profits to return to shareholders. There are no shareholders, or the shareholders in CBH Group are the owners and the customers. So the whole purpose is to drive costs as low as possible while delivering good service. There's no profit margin that has to be built in to deliver to an external third party, and everything that growers generate is returned back to growers in the source of better services growing the business, or in the form of rebates.
Now, look, your pricing structure is really differentiates you as well, in that you have lower prices compared to many other grain traders, working off a rolling 5-year average. How does CBH manage this?
Yeah, sure. So we work off a rolling 5-year average. So we're very reliant on the size of the grain crop, and that's our sole source of revenue. So as you can imagine, take the last 2 years, for example. 2 years ago, we had a harvest of over 16 million tonne. Last year, we had a harvest of 9.7 million. So the fluctuations in revenue can be massive, and we need to make sure that we're not charging growers too much money, but we also need to make sure that we're covered for the poor growing seasons, and that we're generating enough revenue to run the business. So there's a lot of analysis that goes into that. We look through the cycle and work on long-term averages or 5-year rolling averages. We've got a lot of seasonal variability, and also, farming practices are just improving year on year, so that's also taken into account.
And once it's grown and turned up at one of your silos, where does it go next, and who controls that? Is CBH involved right through to the port and beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. So CBH is involved from the receival site right through to the port. So once the grain's received on site, CBH has its own dedicated rail fleet. Where possible, we take as much grain as we can on rail, keep it off the roads, and it's the most viable transport method. What doesn't go on rail goes by truck to ports. So we've got 4 strategically located ports throughout Western Australia. And once it gets to port, CBH Group exports approximately 98% of CBH acquires 90% of the WA harvest into its receival sites. And of that 90%, approximately 98% goes through those 4 ports to our international markets right around the world.
Now, as we've heard as we go through this series, cooperative members all need to be very much engaged in the process for it to work and to work effectively. With so many members and such a large area, How do you keep everybody working together and pointed in the same direction?
Yeah, it must be a constant focus. As a cooperative, having a social license among your membership base is really important. We put a lot of effort into staying connected to our growers. We cover a very big area. The CBH board has a more active role with members than perhaps some private companies. There's a lot of CEO management grower roadshows that happen, and we have a dedicated team of business relationship managers that are out in the field assisting growers whenever needed. So it's a constant to keep your members engaged and supportive of the co-op. Is just always going to be at the forefront of your mind. You've got to have a good culture. There's a saying that a co-op expert from the US said to me last year that within a co-op, you've got to make sure that frictions don't turn into fractures, and you've got to have that at some stage. There is going to be frictions amongst your membership base and differing opinions, but you've just got to be constantly working to prove that you're there. The only reason you're there is for the benefit of WA growers.
You've got all those rugged individualists with, I imagine, very strong opinions sometimes on the very key issues. The fact that you've had so much skin in the game for so long proves that culture thing you talked about must be very much front of mind, no matter who's running the place, who's chairman, who's deputy chair at any one particular point in time.
Yeah, spot on. I think culture is just absolutely number one, and culture and good governance run hand in hand together, and that culture must start from the top. And we always challenge ourselves to make sure our culture is set right at board level, which then flows through our management team right down to our front line. And it's our frontline workers that interact with growers every day, and it's important that they feel passionate about the co-op as well, understand the benefit, and they're championing our co-op model. So yeah, it's just number one. And CBH is such a valuable asset, grown to such a valuable asset. When there is a little bit of dissent among the grower base, we've constantly got to be demonstrating to people why the co-op structure is the best structure for this business, and why we believe any other structure will lead to higher costs and ultimately some of the more marginal farming areas perhaps not getting the service that they get today.
Over that period, you've amassed a very, very impressive inventory of assets, and I guess it actually goes well beyond the business of just growing grain. You know, in all the significant parts of the operation, the transport, the logistics, and obviously the sale of your product. It's a pretty amazing thing to bite off and chew, isn't it?
Yeah, it is amazing if you sit back and think the assets that growers have built up and paid for over the years. We've got 100 strategic network sites with $20 million grain storage capacity. We have 4 strategically located ports around the state. We have a dedicated rail fleet. Our marketing and trading team actually purchase between 30 and 60% of the crop, which takes a lot of the risk off growers and move that crop into the international market. We've also got various investments, including flour mills in Southeast Asia. Off the top of my head, I believe they produce about 1.5 million tonne of flour per year. We also have 2 oat processing plants, one in WA, one in South Australia. So it's an amazing asset, and yeah, just to think what growers have done, I'm forever grateful as a younger generation grower, and I've got kids that want to go farming. Forever grateful for the previous generations for this just amazing asset they've built up for us.
And an important part of having all those assets is the sharing component, because not everybody needs to absolutely own every little bit of kit. And that, I guess, also goes for sharing not only equipment, plant and equipment, but resources, data, and critically these days, knowledge. Yeah. Is that a big part of the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just at the start of our data journey, and getting back to sharing. We always make sure that all growers throughout CBH are treated equitably, and equitably doesn't always mean equally, but we always need to govern and control CBH as a whole for the viability of all farmers. So sometimes that does cause a few frustrations, particularly when we're rationalising the network and things that we need to do to make the business remain viable. With relation to data, growers receive massive amounts of data and analysis on their farm today, and there is a lot of talk about how we can utilise that data to help make growers more internationally competitive and more efficient in their businesses. We're finding data is very closely held by growers, and rightly so, and growers are quite private about their data. So if, as a co-op, we want to share data for the benefit of our growers and share growers' data, we've been sent a really clear message that one, growers want to know that that data is going to be protected and remains within their ownership, and it's their data. And the second one is we need to be able to demonstrate to growers that we can use that data for the benefit of their business, for the benefit of the co-op, for the benefit to make them more efficient, more profitable, and more competitive in the globalised environment in which we compete.
And I guess one of the significant challenges, just in terms of harvesting all that data, is strong, reliable connections in the part of the world where you are. What's the story in terms of your ability to tap into the World Wide Web and really connect with an enormous corporate structure and potentially with all your customers overseas?
Yeah, connectivity is a constant conversation within the co-op, and we have one end of the spectrum to the other. So we have growers out there that have amazing connectivity, and then we have other growers. We hear stories that, you know, they still have to get in the car and drive up the top of the hill with their laptop because they can't get connectivity at their house. So it's a big challenge. It's something CBH is always looking at. The challenges lie in that, unfortunately, some of the areas that we farm are not populated enough for a big telco to be able to make, putting fibre out here profitable. And we cover such a large area. We're looking at lots of different ways that we can help growers with connectivity. And we don't necessarily have to always do everything by ourselves. There's a lot of companies out there that are bringing alternate solutions to connectivity. And there's several examples of that throughout Western Australia. So just keeping, I guess, our finger on the pulse there. And if we can anyway facilitate or help already established organisations out there that benefits WA growers, well, CBH is always happy to play a role in that as well.
Look, connectivity is just one of the challenges facing the grain industry, and indeed most agricultural industries in Australia, because we are so export internationally focused. What are some of the big challenges currently facing grain?
Yeah, well, I think that the number one would have to be the coronavirus this year. So that's been a massive challenge, and just, absolutely just appreciative of everything the CBH Group has done. Management just transitioned from working from head office to home seamlessly. We actually continued exporting. We were breaking records with grain going out of our ports, and we were very fortunate to be in the food industry, that there was a real demand for food. So there was a lot of procedure put in place to make sure that we didn't have to close our ports at any time due to infection. And to date, we haven't had one coronavirus case within the CBH Group. We also have offices internationally, and those measures extended internationally to our offices. I think the second major challenge today for Australian growers or West Australian growers is we compete with a lot of lower cost origins. And the Black Sea is a great example. They can produce grain a lot cheaper than what we can. They have soils that are much more fertile. And our one big positive we've got going for us is that we are closer to our main markets in Southeast Asia. So it's really important that we keep driving efficiencies in the business because we are competing for the same markets as these low cost margins producing places.
Well, you've talked about the coronavirus and obviously the periodic trading hurdles that are thrown up in front of you, and then there's obviously weather and all manner of other things. For you, how important a factor is being a cooperative in helping the resilience of your members and your business?
Yeah, I think it's the absolute number one reason, and it's why I'm sitting at the boardroom table. That's what led me to become a director. Was during the last corporatisation bid, I really wanted to get involved and protect the co-op structure. I think any other structure will lead to rising costs because the business suddenly changes to becoming value driven to return value to the growers. It pivots to become a profit generating business to give profits to external shareholders. The only way those profits can be generated are from increasing costs to growers. So the CBH Group, I think, is absolutely a vital part of keeping WA grain growers internationally competitive, and it flows right through our communities and successful WA farming industry. There's a lot of support services around that in our local communities. So it leads right through the community to sustainable communities, keeps more kids in our schools, more members in our sporting clubs. So it's just the CBH Group plays such an important role right throughout regional grain growing Western Australia.
Now, look, it's interesting that you said you were prepared to put your hand up and get on the board and actually have a very active say in the future direction. I understand that a teenage Natalie wasn't necessarily aimed and ready to be fired into a farming anything.
Yeah, no, that's right, Peter. Pete, so I married into farming. So I met my husband very young at the age of 17. I always grew up in a regional community. My parents are small business owners. So it's been great to be on both sides of the fence, from living in a regional community as a small business owner, now being a farmer. When I met my husband, I originally trained as a nurse, and I met my husband and I began working on the farm, and I enjoyed it more and more. Just absolutely loved it. I'm a very practical outdoor sort of person. And it just developed from there. I resigned from nursing and went on a trip to Canada with wasn't my husband back then, but my partner and another couple, and we actually did a grain harvest on a Canadian farm. And that was the first time I realised what an amazing setup CBH was, and I got grew a lot of interest in looking into CBH. And from there, I joined the Grower Advisory Council for CBH, which I sat on for 18 months. And then during the corporatisation bid, I put my hand up for the board, not with an expectation as to whether I would get on or not, but we call for diversity, which comes in all forms. So if we want diversity people on our board, we need diverse people standing. So I even thought if I didn't get on the board, maybe it would encourage more growers to want to get involved with their co-op.
Look, it's often said that if you really want to get things done, particularly in the bush, you find the busiest person you can and give them something extra to do. Let's have a look at this. You've got the farming business. You're the mother of 3 primary school kids. You are currently studying for a Bachelor of Commerce. You're in the management of CBH and all that entails, as you've outlined. I guess the burning question on everybody's lips is, how do you keep all those balls in the air?
Yeah, I've sort of doing everything at once there. It wasn't what I envisaged. When I started my degree, I thought I would upskill while my children were young and I might go off and do something later on in life. But one corporatisation bid and that changed there. So I'm really lucky. I think there's two key things. The first is I'm passionate and I absolutely love everything I do, and it's such a privilege to be in a leadership role at CBH. It's a role that, you know, not a lot of people get to experience. So I'm just driven to make sure that I've got the skills I need to manage or to help govern our co-op and help steer it forward. So I think, you know, my accounting and business law degree, Bachelor of Commerce, that really equips me with the skills I need in the boardroom. Everything sort of works around that, and I've got an amazing support network around me, and that's why I can do what I can do. So my three kids are, Chloe's 5, Noah is 10, and Jace is 12. And yeah, we've got an amazing support network. My husband, both sets of grandparents. I actually have someone on the farm that is employed full time to give me a hand. So when I'm off in meetings in Perth, it's actually my auntie. She comes in the house and does all the daily jobs, the cooking and cleaning and looking after the kids. Yeah, my kids have got a fantastic school. I've got a fantastic group of friends. So I'm just really fortunate that I've got a great support network and allows me to do what I love.
And I guess in a sense you are the manifestation of the ideals of getting as younger people as possible involved as early as possible, and women with all the skill set that they bring. And I guess it's a big organisation that can facilitate all those kinds of things and encourage people like you, where you live, to be involved, you know, in something as big as CBH.
Yeah, absolutely. When I joined the board a bit under 3 years ago, it was really important as the first female grower director in the co-op's history. And I don't know if I was the youngest director, but probably one of the youngest directors on the board. It was really important that I did a good job and represented that, that, you know, it's good to have diversity on the board. And as a co-op, we need to make sure that we're equipping our skill base, our grower base, with the skills they need so they can come through and govern our co-op in the future. And we've got a big role that starts at grassroots levels in the communities. We've actually just had our second female grower director ever appointed to the board just a few days ago. So that's fantastic. And we've tried to create an environment that supports diversity. But I don't think you can ever force it, because we want to attract the best that we've got to govern our co-op. It's such a valuable asset. So to see the diversity starting to happen naturally, and for CBH being really committed to do everything we can to support the development of our growers and attract people to want to put their hand up and help steer this co-op for the future, it's a great thing to be a part of.
Do you get a sense there are other agricultural commodity groups within your own state and in other parts of Australia that have a bit of a look over the fence at what CBH has done and what they're doing, and thinks we really need to attach a set of jumper leads to this mob? We could learn a bit from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we encourage other grain businesses, globalised grain businesses, to come and trade in the West Australian market. And if you take our marketing and trading arm for an example, buying the West Australian crop, you've got to take on huge risk to do that. And while we mitigate that risk as much as possible, CBH actively encourages other buyers to come into the market, and you know, we sort of aim to buy between 30 and 60% of the crop. But we actually need these other grain producers to want to buy our grain to export internationally. So that's really important, and I think there always is a little bit of tension there when other corporate companies would probably like to crack the WA market in a bigger way, whether it's storage and handling or other ways. But I just believe that CBH, it needs to be protected. And we've seen the corporatisation happen in other states in Western Australia, and their costs have risen significantly because of it. So as a volume-based business, the revenue generated is solely reliant on the size of the WA crop. it's so important that we protect the co-op, and it's solely there to benefit the growers, not for any other reason. And there are some areas within the business that we absolutely need other companies to come and give us a hand with and give WA growers a hand with, but we also need to protect the core meaning of our business.
Look, this is probably a good opportunity for us to once again remind our viewers that we're running a poll in conjunction with today's interview with Natalie, and we're looking for your thoughts on what is the biggest benefit that internet connectivity has brought to farming. There are a range of options. You could probably tick all of them, to be frank, and not be too wide of the mark, but we do want you to go through that and be involved in the process as much as you can. Click on the poll. It's on in the live chat to the right of this stream, and select your answer. We're really interested in getting your feedback and your involvement from that point of view. Natalie, with the vantage point that you've had now as a board member and now as deputy chair, do you think you're farming better, differently? Has it had an effect having that sort of helicopter view of the whole game onto what you're actually doing back on the ground?
I think some of the values are very similar within the CBH Group, probably what we adopt on our farm. And I think efficiency is absolutely a key. And sometimes simplicity and driving efficiencies to make your business as profitable as possible. And we talk about areas of innovation and technology. There's a lot of different innovation and technology and farming practices getting trialled these days. And I think if you're going to adopt innovation and technology, it's got to bring value to your business, and it's got to help you to become more profitable. So that's very similar on the farm to in CBH. There's a massive amount of innovation out there. You talk of things about artificial intelligence and autonomous practices. We've just got to be careful with CBH that anything that we adopt, we always have to be looking to innovate. Anything we adopt must return value to our growers, and sometimes it's better to be a fast follower and let other people trial that innovation, and once it's proven, be ready to adopt that for the benefit of our growers. So I think there's the same principles there, farming as to CBH.
Is there something that's particularly caught your eye though and really captured your imagination that you think this might be the next big thing that Carl and I have got to look at and look at trying to fund?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a big push in the tech space and innovation space for use of autonomous vehicles on farm, the use of drones to check crops. And we are very cautiously standing on the sideline, really watching and really keeping up to speed with what's happening. But we don't believe it's at a place yet where it's going to return a lot of value to our business. There's a few little challenges with drones, really simple stuff like battery life and things like that. Connectivity, once again, sometimes you need to be attached to Wi-Fi to be able to use your drone. Looking forward, we just want that to be proven before we spend the money on it for our business.
Look, so much of what you do as grain growers is focused very clearly on export markets, and I guess you indicated a little earlier that the primary challenge in 2020 has been how to manage your way through the coronavirus challenges. I guess you probably see that as being a continuing challenge now as we move through this the balance of 2020 and this harvest season and well into the future. How important has the support from state and federal governments, those authorities, in A, declaring agriculture an essential service, and B, really trying to put a foundation and support to exporters, food exporters?
Yeah, absolutely critical. So we have very positive relationships with our government counterparts, and their support throughout the coronavirus has been greatly appreciated. And we've we have storage for 20 million tonne of grain storage. But if something had happened and our ports had have been shut down and we weren't able to export, and the CBH Group wasn't able to generate the revenue it needed through marketing and trading, it wouldn't take too long before you'd come across some significant challenges. And I'm sure we'd do everything we could if we had to receive another harvest on top of that. The CBH Group is really well equipped to handle a crisis such like this, or something we talk about black swan events. This had the potential to be a black swan event where our revenue could have been cut off. And this is why, at times the CBH balance sheet can be criticised. It's called a fat and lazy balance sheet, but the co-op is deliberately conservative, and our balance sheet must be resilient enough to be able to suffer these shocks and survive. We're different to corporate structures where you're really restricted in ways which you can raise capital. We don't want to raise fees to growers, and selling off some of our asset base, our storage and handling, facilities is just not an option. So we make sure that as a business, we are resilient enough to get through some really, really tough times, and that this co-op can exist, for as far as I want, forever into the future. So
One of the clever things that CBH has done is really establish themselves in some of those key markets with very rock solid partnerships, which I guess at times of uncertainty are really, part of your insurance.
yeah, spot on. And our marketing and trading arm of the business have done an amazing job there. And particularly in one of our main grain trading markets, Southeast Asia. So the value or relationships are highly, highly valued. And the CBH Group has built up some really long-term relationships. We're known as a reliable supplier of grain and good quality grain. And that really helped us throughout the coronavirus. When perhaps some areas of the world hadn't had the best harvest the season before, buyers were looking to shore up their supplies, and we absolutely benefited from that throughout the coronavirus period, and those relationships played a big part in that. So it's something, it's as big as culture, I think. Culture and relationships is massively important.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought the conversation back to culture, because it's fair to say that many co-ops succeed or fail because of the sweat equity involved in them. What social value is created, through your cooperative? You've talked a little bit about it already, but I think it's probably worth hearing a little bit about how it fits into the whole jigsaw puzzle of ag in WA and beyond.
Yep. Yeah, it's something that the social value is always at front of mind, and we've got to be able to demonstrate to growers why the CBH Group and its business structure is the best structure for WA growers. There's a few things that jump to mind, and one particularly being a younger grower. I sometimes think that if we don't continuing to champion our model and champion why we were created in the first place, I fear sometimes that could get lost amongst the younger generation, that actually we forgot that CBH Group was formed because the cost of storing and handling grain was so high. So I've said to people before, I believed if CBH ever got corporatised, well, probably in another 50 years, a group of farmers would start another co-op. So it would do full circle, I think. We've always got to make sure that our growers understand the co-op model and the benefits of co-op model. And I think sometimes people that want to corporatise prey on that a bit, because everybody understands how the corporate model works. And I know through my university studies, the co-op model is not something that's taught academically enough. And we need to get better at that, to people to understand the corporate model, the cooperative model, and the benefits of that. So just continually making sure our growers are informed and making sure our co-op is transparent with why we're here, how we operate with growers. It's really important. And if we ever lose our social license and our culture heads in the wrong direction, it often, as I said earlier, those frictions turn into factions, and it can lead to the demise of a co-op. And you know, I don't think we'd realise until we lost it how amazing it was. So we've just got to, make sure we've got the best people to govern and run the co-op, and just demonstrate to growers why we're here.
And look, I guess part of the CBH story is some of the remarkable individuals who made a contribution throughout that time. And I just love the story of the guy who flew to Europe to borrow money for the port of Kwinana, and obviously came under some fairly strident criticism. But just tell us how that paid off.
Yeah, and I don't have all the details, but I was lucky enough at the CBH Group holds a over 25-year dinner every year for people that have been employed for more than 25 years. And I actually met one of the men that flew over to Europe and got this loan. And our Kwinana terminal, at one stage, it was, you know, the biggest port in the Southern Hemisphere. To be brave enough to, I think it was the biggest loan in Western Australia or Australia at the time, and to be brave enough to make that move, and I will go out on a limb and say that is our number one strategic asset, is Kwinana Port, is quite astounding. And they actually flew over, and I believe they got the loan in Swiss francs, and there was a bit of trouble with that when they converted the money. I'm not sure the exact details. But apparently they got the money and they built Kwinana Port. I was down there last week, an amazing asset. And yes, came under scrutiny, as every big decision does. And the CBH Group wouldn't be what it is today without Kwinana Port. So just absolutely full of admiration for the people that had the courage to do that and do it successfully.
No guts, no glory.
Yeah, that's right.
It's been great talking to you, Natalie. My final question is, along this amazing journey that you've had, and an unlikely one in some regards, what's the one big lesson that you've learned that would help our farm audience watching today? What's the best bit of advice, or who's the best mentor,
Yep.
and particularly for those thinking about joining a cooperative or creating a cooperative?
Yeah, well, I think being a part of a cooperative is such a rewarding experience. My biggest piece of advice is, obviously you need to get your governance right and your culture right, and to form a cooperative and to be involved in the governance of a cooperative, you've got to be prepared to make the tough decisions. And sometimes those decisions are unpopular amongst some of the growing base, but they must be made in the best interest of the co-op. And that's a constant thing that as a director, you've always got to make sure you're protecting and you're governing your co-op as a whole to ensure its long-term success. So you've got to be brave enough to make those decisions that you might get a bit of short-term pushback on, and some negativity from the grower base. But if you truly believe you're making decisions in the best interest of the co-op, it's a lot easier to sleep at night when that criticism comes in. So it's not always an easy gig, but it's just one of the most, probably the most rewarding thing I do in my life, is to be able to represent WA growers and be a part of leadership groups. It's amazing.
Well, look, it's been amazing talking to you, Natalie. It's just, it's a great story. I think it's a timely one too, a timely sort of inspiration for a lot of people who are maybe questioning where their business and their commodity section is heading. So it's been a real delight, and quite amazing, really. We were able to wedge our way into what is obviously the busiest schedule in Western Australia right now. Good luck with all those projects you've got on the home front and beyond, academia, and obviously your board your board duties, and obviously goes without saying, all the best for this next harvest.
Yeah, thanks very much, Pete, and thanks for having me today. It's been great to talk to you.
Our pleasure entirely. Natalie Browning, everybody. Now, look, make sure you stay tuned to our next roundtable, where we'll be looking into sharing knowledge and data. Natalie spoke about it, what an important thing it is to the whole go forward looking attitude of CBH. The advantages, the disadvantages, and the safeguards that really need to be locked in. And we're going to be joined in this really important discussion by another West Australian grain grower of some note, Wally Newman, Philip Guthrie, Partnerships and Innovation Lead with the Birchip Cropping Group. Boy, haven't they got skin in this game. Kelly Pearce is an agricultural scientist, director, and a farmer. And of course, helping us wrangle this important discussion, as always, is Melina Morris, who is the CEO of the Business Council for Cooperatives and Mutuals. That's coming up at 7:45. We want to encourage you to check out the entire series that we've put together of cooperative conversations. We're thoroughly enjoying the insights and the variety of insights and experiences that we're being able to tease out. You should go to our website to get onto that. It's conversations.coopfarming.coop to find the full lineup of all those episodes. And remember, the series is available now and on demand in future, so you can fit it into your busy schedule as well. If tonight has kind of inspired you and set off a bit of a light bulb above your head, and you want to get inspired and have a really serious look about how a co-op could work for your business, or maybe you're already down that path of exploring cooperative models for your community, go to that website, Cooperative Marketing website, for a bunch of different ways that the Business Council for Cooperatives and Mutuals can help you. There are educational bursaries, for instance, available to support farmers, fishers and foresters to access all the relevant cooperative education. And we even have a hotline if you want to ring up and speak to someone to find out what's needed for you to get involved and start a co-op. But for now, that's all we have time for. It's been great once again to talk to somebody right at the cutting edge of a significant Australian agricultural industry. See you soon for the roundtable discussion.